All right. Welcome to Mondays with Mooche, everybody. And Joe, anytime you're ready, you can get started.
Welcome, folks. For those of you who don't know, my name is Joe Muccioli. I'm the Artistic Director for the Jazz Arts Project, a non-profit organization which for more than 16 years has been presenting and honoring jazz with world-class concerts, high-level education programs for area youth. Well, we've taken some time since the holidays, and we have been doing some planning to see how best to continue our mission. How best to mentor the young musicians in the area, how to bring you the best of the best music performances, and how to transition to open concerts when possible. Meanwhile, in April of 1979, long ago in the before times, when the Newark Board of Education transferred a little-used radio station license with the frequency of 88.3 FM and the call letters of Wbgo, a new community was born. A community of jazz lovers, jazz musicians, and all-around champions of the jazz sphere. At first, it was called Newark Public Radio in cooperation with Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and then it became an affiliate with National Public Radio, NPR, and went to a 24-hour broadcast format in 1980. Around that time, a young and debonair bon vivant walked into the humble storefront studio in downtown Newark, a brick facade with gold-painted call letters festooned above the door. He was about to apply for a job. As it happens, sitting next to him in the lobby was none other than Mercer Ellington. Wow, there's no way I'm going to get this job, he thought, with that kind of competition. Well, Mercer wasn't competition, he was a guest, and yes, Gary Walker did get the job. And now, 49 years later, he is still the alarm clock for countless jazz lovers throughout the region with his drive time morning jazz show.
Seven come 11. Francis Albert this morning at Jazz 88. Frank Sinatra from WBGO. And, oh man, just can't get enough of Frank Sinatra. I was looking at the New York Times today that there have been so many fantastic people that I have had the chance to meet. Artists of this great music from Gerald Wilson to Dizzy Gillespie. I can still remember the time Dizzy and I stole a silver ice bucket from Lincoln Center. Oh. Maybe shouldn't say that, should I?
Today, WBGO's broadcast signal is heard by listeners on the air in a widespread area in and around the home city of Newark, New Jersey, and far into New York, Long Island, South Jersey, and no doubt into Pennsylvania. And on the internet, fans from around the globe tune in for jazz, blues, rhythm and blues, and award-winning news. So our guest today is Gary Walker. He's the station's longtime music director and has many of his own honors and awards, including the Gavin Magazine Jazz Radio Personality of the Year Award. Gary remembers job titles being very fluid in the early days. We would all answer the phone, he said. Sometimes the general manager would call me at 7 a.m. and say, Gary, what are you doing? I would say, Bob, I'm on the air. And he'd say, listen, during the news break, can you go out front and throw some salt on the sidewalk? It's snowing. So when you enter Gary Walker into the Google machine, this is what you get. Wow. Gary, I had no idea you had a whole nother persona. Get ripped with Gary Walker. There are others, actually. FBI agent Gary Walker. Gary Walker, MD. Gary Walker, a field fisher attorney, whatever that is. It looks like this one is from a Don Rickles lookalike contest. Gary Walker takes runner-up honors. Gary Walker, linebacker. And Gary Walker, No, seriously, scroll down a little bit, you'll find him. And here he is in the studio. Wait, is it? Okay. It is evident that he hangs out with an enviable list of top echelon jazz artists and all sorts of movers and shakers in the industry. And as I have discovered, he is something of a spoken word artist in his own right. Check out his introduction for a James Carter organ trio gig.
James Carter has given us an awful lot. He put a gardenia in Billie Holiday's hair. He made us think twice about Django Reinhardt. He took evergreens and made them classics. He called them Jurassic classics. That's right. We're at the crossroads. We're at the crossroads of church and the Chitlin Circuit. We're at the feeling of the clubs like the Cadillac, the Sparky J's, and the Key Clubs in Newark, New Jersey. Or the clubs in Detroit like the Chesterfield, and the Whippoorwill, and the Golden Room of the 20 Grand. That's right. I know you're ready for it tonight. He has done just about everything, but I have to give props to his brother, who took an 11-year-old James Carter to see Mr. Donald Washington in Detroit. And Donald said, "What do you want to do, son?" And he said, "I want to play the saxophone." You'll hear for yourself how serious he was. Ladies and gentlemen, the James Carter Organ Trio.
In an article for NewJerseyArts.net, Scott Burchert writes, "If Walker told me he was born in a broadcasting booth with a microphone in his hand, I'd believe him. He has everyone's idea of the perfect radio voice, resonant with a touch of grit around the edges, an intonation that doesn't swing his sentences upward or curve them downward, but at the end of every phrase drifts sideways into a deeper register. The effect of such a voice is fundamentally cool, or hip, as Walker tends to call things he thinks are cool. And I would agree. Gary has the perfect voice for radio, and in fact jazz especially. Not only in the sonic qualities, but in the enthusiasm, the knowledge, the experience, and the way he keeps us engaged over the airwaves, even when he is alone in a little room broadcasting his love for the music. It is indeed infectious. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gary Walker.
Wow.
You can turn your mics on and clap.
Wow.
Welcome, Gary.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome.
Good trip home tonight. I don't know how to
Thunderous applause. How are you, Gary?
Thank you for the introduction and to all the ladies in the house. Happy International Women's Day.
There you go.
All right.
Give yourself a round of applause.
Here, here.
The better half.
If I can figure out how to get my camera on, I will join you.
Joe lost all of his ability to turn this camera on because he gave everything to that film. That was a wonderful short you did there, Joe.
There you go. How's that?
Beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, where'd you get that footage, man?
I scoped it out. I looked around. I'm a sleuth about that kind of stuff.
You're pretty good at it.
Well, I appreciate that. It was easy material, Gary. Easy to find, actually. Easy to find good stuff, I should say.
Now, you saw that photograph of myself and Quincy Jones.
Yeah.
Quincy was right in the middle of showing me the difference between signs made by the Crips and the Bloods. And he said, but if you come to Los Angeles, don't ever put your hands like this or like this.
Whoa.
You don't want to do that.
There you go.
Quincy, why'd you show me that then?
he was helping you out so you didn't get in trouble.
He was.
I guess.
There's one of my
beautiful cat.
Yo, absolutely.
I worked with him quite a bit several years ago. What's the difference between several and many? I always wonder about that.
In any case, a few years difference.
In any case, he's just a pure gentleman, just a beautiful guy.
Well, it's nice to be here with you tonight, Joe. Of course, I've been down at your organization there in Red Bank a couple of times.
Yes, you have.
Had a good time. There's a lot of fans down South Jersey way. And, since the advent of the internet, we're quite proud of the fact that a lot of our listeners come from there. The internet has been just an amazing boon, I think, to the world of jazz, because now you don't know whether you're talking to somebody getting up in Newark, having their breakfast in Bloomfield, starting their day in Manhattan, or maybe having lunch in Italy. And it's all of those things, or listening to morning jazz as their evening jazz program in Japan.
That's right. In fact, even in this little soiree we do here, every once in a while I see people signing in from Vancouver or Germany one time and Sweden and all over. It's really interesting.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on tonight. I appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for coming on with us and allowing us to hang, as it were. So, Carmen, I take it.
And we're old working buddies.
Oh, we're old buddies. Yeah, Carmen. I knew Carmen before he ever started running.
You did actually. Yeah, I guess I did.
He was running for his life. Now he runs for his health.
Yeah. Just for those who are here, I used to work at Wbgo, and I had the honor and privilege of I started in marketing, and I moved on into development, and ended up working with the Jazz Leadership Society. And I should give a hello to John Newcott. John Newcott was the person who asked me to join the development team, and he's with us tonight. And just so that people know, we've got a few special people here from WBGO tonight. We've got Dorthon Kirk, who's with us this evening. Welcome, Dorthon. And I believe Sheila Anderson just joined us as well. She is a WBGO host, and she's with us tonight. So welcome, guys. Thank you for joining us. So it's a nice family reunion. And WBGO, oh, I should mention this real quick. I've got my WBGO member card. This is current. Doesn't expire until June. So
you're a card-carrying member.
I'm a card-carrying member, and of course, as a card-carrying member, I get my beautiful bumper sticker, which I keep on my wall. So I took it down, but just so I can show that people know that my membership is current.
And a note about the ladies of WBGO: Wednesday night on the Pulse, there's going to be a special sharing hosted by our afternoon jazz host, Kiana Faircloth, and all the ladies of WBGO are going to be on chatting about, what WBGO is all about, what it means to them, what it means to them in a world that traditionally has been dominated by men.
Yeah. So I want to give a shout out to Mark Schulman. Mark Schulman, show us your WBGO bumper sticker there. We've got another WBGO member in the house, and Mark is a supporter as well of WBGO and a supporter of Jazz Arts Project. So thank you, Mark, for supporting us in jazz. So anyway, but we'll get on enough of that. I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody who's here.
So Carmen, weren't you a Didn't you share the mic with one of the mornings with Gary?
I did. I did. I was very fortunate. I thought that might come up. I was very fortunate a year ago, about a year and a half ago. I got a call from John, and I was one of the Jazz Leadership Society members who will remain anonymous, gave me a gift and gave me the opportunity to host an hour. And so I got to host an hour with Gary Walker. And I chose Gary because Gary, one, is an amazing host. And just a wonderful DJ, but also a wonderful friend. Gary has been one of my biggest supporters. I run a lot, and a lot of times I do fundraising when I run, and Gary was always one of the first people to make a contribution to my running, as well as also send me emails and give me articles and tips on running so that I would not hurt myself. So I chose my hour to do it with Gary Walker, which was a blast. So I had a wonderful time. I actually don't know. Do you know I've never listened to that recording though? I was afraid to listen to my own voice, so I haven't heard it.
Good, man. It's pretty good.
It was a great time.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You should check it out.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So I did some Natalie Cole and Aretha Franklin and had a really nice selection of tunes we played for an hour.
Gary, did you show him the ropes on how to broadcast?
You know, Carmen, and you know this from your work with him, is Carmen can just be in a room and he just soaks it up. So you didn't have to show him anything. Just walking in the door, if he was, greeting one of our Jazz Leadership Society people that was perhaps there to host an hour, he walked in the room and he just watched. It's just like the best announcers, the best disc jockeys, if you will, if they're in an interview situation, are those people who listen. And I know that sounds simple, but it's not simple. It's difficult. Listen, to your average interview, and you can tell the person isn't listening.
So, well, thank you for that, Gary. So what I want to know, how did you get your start in radio? And what prompted you to get started in radio? Because I know for me, I have a big record collection, and I was contemplating during COVID to get rid of it, but I made a decision not to get rid of it. And ever since I made that decision to keep my music, I realized music is always going to be a part of me. It's a part of who I am. And I have a picture of myself at 6 years old with a turntable playing records at 6 years old. And that's still the person I am today. So I was curious about your journey with music and how you got to where you are today.
Carmen, you're a little ahead of me. I was 10 years old and I was in the Cub Scouts. It was around Thanksgiving time of year, and our dead mother decided to take us on a field trip. Where? To a farm that raised turkeys. Not a good choice, because what do they do to turkeys around Thanksgiving time? They slaughter them.
Not very nice.
So I remember one of the things, I walked by this huge tank and I peeked into it, and it was nothing but turkey heads. It could have scarred me for life, but it didn't. And we continued on into the farmhouse, where I learned that the farmer that owned the turkey farm also had a Saturday morning radio program, like an RFD kind of program. And he said, I need a volunteer. Well, I happened to be standing in the front, and I raised my hand. And so we did a short little interview, a turkey farmer and a 10-year-old. I know, and it's not an Ellington story, but we'll get there. And then I had to tune in that following Sunday morning at like 5 a.m. Where else do you put a show hosted with a turkey farmer? Sunday morning at 5 a.m. And there I was on the radio. And there was just something magic about that must have stayed with me, not consciously necessarily, but later on when I graduated from high school and went to college, I was a finance major. And I noticed going to one of the required classes, this was at the University of Texas, that on my way to the speech building, I noticed, because I always passed the radio station at UT, that they seemed to be having a lot more fun than I was in the finance department. Yeah. Although I kept it as a minor, I decided to change my major to broadcasting. And that led to worked there at the university's station that was called Carrier Current, that just went to the dormitories at the University of Texas. Then I moved north to help my parents finish building a home, which my mother, until she passed just about a month ago, lived in that same home overlooking a lake in Northeast Ohio. So we knew what we were doing there. But I did some graduate work in communications, got my first couple of commercial jobs. The very first commercial job was running the board for the secondary markets for the Cleveland Indians baseball games. And when the baseball games ended early, then Gary got to play rock and roll music afterward for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But jazz was always something that was with me as a kid. My father, I wouldn't call him a jazz fan, but there was Ellington and Lena Horne. And some of you may know the trumpeter Rafael Mendez. There were those kind of records around my house. And I always remembered those. But radio, you know, in the 50s, man, the radio was glued to your ear. Imagine an iPad or an iPod, I should say, about the same size. It was a transistor radio. And nobody went anywhere without that transistor radio. And it was my companion late at night as I listened to WLS in Chicago or WBZ in Boston or some of the other clear channel stations that would broadcast late at night and would reach my little bedroom in Northeast Ohio. Subsequent work in Texas, in the Dallas market and back in the Cleveland market. And then meeting a woman when I was in graduate school who was in the theater department. And we eventually got married and moved to New York City. And I thought to myself, gosh, if there's nothing for me to do in New York City, I might as well give up. There's got to be something. And she, of course, was pursuing a career in acting. And when I got to New York, I thought there must be a half a dozen jazz stations around here. It's New York City. And I called the one person I knew in New York he had a small record label that's still in business, Joe Fields. What a great guy. And he said, well, would you like to go back to school? And why would I want to go back to school? He said, well, there's a little station at Columbia University and they have some jazz. How about Connecticut? Well, to someone who had just moved to New York City, Connecticut seemed like 4,000 miles up the road. Right. And so I passed on that. And he said, but there is this little station in Newark, but it's a pretty tight-knit group of individuals. And I said, tell me who the program director is. And I got in touch with him. And 5 weeks later, because they were just transitioning at the time, as you mentioned in your introduction, 1979, we went off the air at around midnight. And so when WRVR changed formats, it was the opportunity for WBGO to go 24 hours. And I walked in the door right at that moment when we were transitioning to 24 hours and was lucky enough to get a show on Saturday mornings from 6 a.m. until 10 a.m. And the only person I knew was the guy that followed me, Bob Porter. And then on Sundays, there was a guy that followed me named Anthony Wilson, who had just moved to the same area from Mississippi. And I met his wife one time out in the lobby. I use that word very loosely. And I said, I know why your husband's here. What would you like to do? And she said, well, you know, I'm a jazz singer and I'm going to test my mettle in the jazz capital of the world. And her name was Cassandra Wilson. And she had just moved here. And so these are some of the young stories of the existence of WBGO as it relates to Gary Walker. And by the way, I am all of those people that you saw in the introduction. I race cars. I am a bodybuilder. I'm a former linebacker. I'm on parole. It's all of those things wrapped into one.
You're shapeshifter.
I had no doubt of that.
And gives me the qualifications to share jazz music every Monday through Friday with audiences around the corner and around the world. And I feel like I'm one of the luckiest guys on this planet.
Very well said. Very well said. You know, when I was putting that together, I realized that 1979, 1980, I was out of college already by the time BGO came into existence. So I grew up, you know, listening to the radio next to my ear to WRVR. And I remember that distinctly through high school. You know, that was my early introduction to this music.
So Ed Beach was one of the guys on that station, right?
I think so, yeah. WRVR. It was and the middle of the night, I remember, it was a very like kind of subdued, quiet speaking voice, and it would just sort of lull you along, you know.
Well, you know,
very interesting.
You know, Joe, you listen to jazz radio around the country and around the world. Traditionally, that's been the riff for some reason, is the ultra cool. You know,
that's right.
Right?
That's
Never
right.
raise your voice. God, don't let anybody see you get excited about anything. You know, and that
well, I can tell you though, I was quite ticked off when RVR changed to country western music. I couldn't understand that for the life of me.
And the guy that did news over there when they were the jazz station ended up at WBGO, a dear friend of mine, Bruce Anderson. I just spoke to him the day before yesterday.
Oh, sure, I remember Bruce. Sure.
Yeah, that's one of the things about this community. Especially the WBGO community, is people don't go away. They may leave, but they don't go away.
No, we don't.
I'm always running into Carmen.
Always.
You know? I've seen John in a couple of different incarnations, you know, over the course of his career, mostly in the record business in New York City. Awilda Rivera moved down south. She'll be back during our fundraiser because she's an integral part still. Yeah. Wiley Rollins, the guy that talked me into working there full time, is a guy that I stay in touch with.
And Rhonda's back too, right? Rhonda's in California.
Rhonda Hamilton moved to California, and because of Zoom and all this other technology, she's back on the air at WBGO with a wonderful 2-hour program on Sundays, which this week will be an in-depth 2-hour look at Toshiko Akiyoshi. Mary Lou Williams last week, the Diva Jazz Orchestra. You know, as we celebrate Women's History Month, we do it with the women who stand out and make this music the special art form that it is.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. You know, do you foresee the technology changes that we've been using over this past year as having a permanent benefit to the industry?
Well, yes, as we become more comfortable with it and learn how to do things with it, some of our podcast people already have taken that next step. But on a regular basis, we've pretty much shelved the idea of, the interview. You know, hey, tomorrow afternoon, somebody's going to drop by and chat for a while. We're going to play some music and things. But those are things that I think once we embrace fully the technology, we'll have the freedom to do those kind of things, and a freedom like we've never had before. No longer will people have to come to downtown Newark. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the fact that, you know, it's out of the way for a lot of folks. You don't have to do that now. Conversely, you can also find probably some of the best radio talent in the world, should you choose to go the Zoom route in terms of people that host your programs. I mean,
that's what I was wondering. You know, from the announcers to everything could be anywhere in the world, and your guests could be anywhere in the world, and you know, it certainly expands the whole reach.
We have done a couple of live virtual events where we went to the Yamaha studios in Midtown Manhattan, even the Jazz Gallery for a special holiday show with Warren Wolf. The adjustment there, I think, not necessarily for the musicians, they're just thrilled to see each other, but for the rest of us is the fact that there's no audience. So you're talking, but it shouldn't be that hard, should it? Because when I get up and walk into the living room, like I've done since last March, to start my day on the radio at WBGO, I know you're there, but I don't see you. And so I begin the day with the music. I say a couple of things about, whatever is popping into my head for the day, who's a birthday, what kind of specials are coming up. And if I did this in public, they would probably come up and take me away to somewhere special where I could sit in a little room and talk to myself for a long, long time.
Well, how is that different than sitting in a studio all by yourself? Well,
that's what I'm saying, Joe, is it's actually no different, but you come to expect in a live performance setting that audience when you walk out, and to walk out and there's no audience whatsoever. But the results can be pretty spectacular, as it was with Christian Sands. All of these things I'm referencing, you can go to our website and check them out. The holidays program with Warren Wolf, or one program that I'm quite proud of, was an afternoon in the fall of 2019 where I spent an hour and a half with Chick Corea and Bela Fleck. And they were like this close, and I was in the middle.
I had that picture up in the intro we did.
Yeah.
Right.
And that program, by the way, if you go to our website, you can call it up and you can listen to a cat that was really special. And the thing that really made Chick Corea special is that unlike a lot of folks that we all know, Chick Corea got up every day ready to learn something new. And when we got to the subject of his excitement about Bela Fleck showing him the world of bluegrass music, I'll never forget the look on his face. And then what took place after that, when the two of them, two really disparate worlds, the banjo, clink, clink, and the piano coming together and making just some incredible, joyous music. And that was, what Chick Corea represented. And I was so fortunate to just sit in the middle of that for an afternoon in 2019. I'll never forget it.
So I'm curious, Gary, two questions. I'm going to ask a question, and then we have a question from John. But I wanted to know, in terms of, you've been doing this for such a long time. I'm curious about what is your relationship with some of these musicians? I mean, you interview a lot of musicians. Do you develop friendships with many of these musicians? And I mean, because after a while, I mean, you're sitting in that chair, and I mean, WBGO is one of the premier jazz stations across the world where people come and introduce their music, their new music, and so forth. I was curious about your relationships with the musicians themselves, like Chick Corea, who just passed recently.
Like we hang out. I mean, who hangs out in the year 2021? But friendships have developed over the years. People like Russell Malone and John Faddis. I noticed Andy Farber. I consider Andy Farber a friend that I've gotten to know over the years, an extremely talented individual. Wynton Marsalis, Milt Jackson, some of the folks that I've gotten to know over the course. One guy came for an interview one morning, and he had just come from another radio station where he was extremely disappointed because the disc jockey there wouldn't stop talking about Charlie Parker. And he knew and played with Charlie Parker. But when Lalo Schifrin came to WBGO and sat with me, by the time we were done with the interview, he asked me if I worked for the CIA. and when I asked him why, he said, because you know more about me than I do. And that type of preparation translates into an extreme amount of respect.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mutual respect for what we do. Mm-hmm. The players, for what they come up with and create, as Eric Reed would say, for such a time as this. And the announcers, who are simply, although some of us believe we're stars, the announcers who are simply the conduits for one of the greatest art forms in the world. And we're very fortunate to all be sharing that on a daily basis.
Yeah. So I want to get
Gary, I'm sorry, Carmen. Gary, I was going to mention that and ask about that. When that, for example, that introduction of for James Carter, you obviously had prepared that. You found out as much about him as you can, and you wove that into like this great performance, verbal talking art that you did. It was fantastic.
And the thing about James Carter is, along with having been in the saddle for 39 years, in America they would turn you out to pasture. In other cultures, they look upon that as wisdom and maturity. And for myself, I lived in the Detroit area for some time. My sister and brother were both born there. My father was born there. And I learned a lot about, the nature of the jazz scene in Detroit, Michigan. One of the people I became friends with over the years was, if you remember, the entertainer and radio host and comedian Soupy Sales.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Came from Detroit and was one of the biggest jazz fans on the planet Earth. I believe Soupy was a cat that still has the only, or had, I should say, the only documented footage of Clifford Brown in performance. Oh, wow. Was some stuff that Soupy had. But, he would tell me stories one day, he would book people, he'd be going, if you remember the Soupy Sales show, some of you don't, you're too young, I can tell, but look him up because he was a jazz guy. And he'd be doing his shtick, and you'd see Thelonious Monk walk behind him on the set. And so he told me one day he got this idea to have Dizzy Gillespie as a guest. And he had this elaborate plan, as Soupy always did. And he said, here's what I want to do. I'm going to dress Dizzy up in a knight's costume, complete with the helmet, right? With the mask. And then there's going to be a knock at the door. I'm going to go to the door, and there's going to be this knight standing there. And then when I go and I lift the thing, the only thing that happens is cheeks pop out. That was the whole riff. So they did this they had to do a dress rehearsal, but this is in the days before videotape. So they got done with the dress rehearsal, and it was a real knight's outfit. And it took hours to get into this thing. So at the end of it, Dizzy says, I got to take a break, man. I got to get out of this. I got to go take a leak. And Soupy says, oh, man, we don't have time for this. 20 minutes, we'll be done. 20 and out. That's it. 20 minutes, we'll be done. So they start the program rolling. I think it was Kinescope in those days. And they started it rolling. And Soupy, hi, kids, what's for lunch? And he opens a lunch bag, and then someone's at the door. And he goes to the door, and he opens it up, and there's Dizzy standing there, and it's a knight. And Soupy says, I went to reach for the helmet, and he said, all of a sudden, I heard the sound of rain on a tin roof.
That's great.
And I looked down at the floor, and there was a big puddle on the floor. But these are some of the people in this music. And when Soupy lived in Detroit, to take it back to the James Carter introduction, when Soupy lived in Detroit, all the jazz cats, when they came through town, went to his home, and they would have these wonderful parties. Thelonious Monk and Marion McPartland and Charles Mingus and Milt Jackson, all the cats would come by Soupy's house, and they'd have these incredible parties. And Soupy said one night he got drunk at his own party, and he thought he was going to pass out. He thought, Jesus, what am I going to do? And he goes, I know, shower. So he takes off his clothes and he jumps in the shower thinking that that'll sober him up. So he's in there and his head's down. He's letting the cold water run on his head. And all of a sudden the shower curtain flies open and Marion McPartland jumps in the shower with him. And it startled the hell out of him. And Marion, what are you doing? And she pulled the curtain closed behind her and she said, shh, I'm voting.
Whoa. Yeah.
But you know, the sense memory of a daily existence in the world of jazz is something I think that inspires us on a daily basis. My one regret since COVID, well, actually, there's about 19 of them, but one of them is the fact that Doug Doyle and I don't have too much interplay because of the nature of the technology. Mm-hmm. You know, it's all fired into a computer technically in advance of when you hear it on the air. So there's really not a chance for us to have that interplay that I think is also a part, just as important of a part as the interplay between musicians on a stage. Watching a Korea 3-hour special the other night, which I highly recommend. It's on the Scientology network. There are no recruitment messages. It is simply 3 hours into the life of Chick Corea. Wow. And he told his musicians when they were rehearsing and practicing and getting ready to record the Spanish Heart Band, he said, when you play, look at me. And the guy said, look at you, why? And he goes, when you have a conversation with someone, do you look in the other room? Do you look at your shoes? Do you look over there? No, you're looking me in the eyes. When you play, I want you to do the same thing. And the guy said, I think it was the trombonist, Steve Davis, said, you know what? He was right. It worked. So when you think about the communication for a disc jockey, the communication between the greatest jazz musicians in the world, or those looking to become the greatest or the next generation who will carry the torch forward, don't forget what you're doing for starters. You're simply communicating with one another.
Yeah, musicians are going through that very intensely, because the difference between being in the same room, not only with each other as a musician, there's just vibrations that are absorbed between you, aside from the communication issues, but an audience as well. You know, even though if it's broadcast, no audience, it's maybe a performance, but there's something about, you know, that live issue, the vibrations and the aura inside of a room with actual people, that makes a lot of difference. Well, and a lot of musicians are feeling that. They're missing that now, of playing with each other and playing for an audience.
I see Andy Farber in the room, and I'll bet he could probably speak on that firsthand about, you know, missing that live, that other part of the music magic, as Chick Corea would call it. And that's the audience feedback, you know, and the audience participation in the music that you're making in the moment.
So, Gary, I want to get to some of the questions that we've got from people who are with us tonight. So I'm going to start with John Newcott, who actually is a development director. I don't know your exact title these days. I think it's individual giving, John. But John, you and John work closely together. John actually produces you in the mornings when you guys do your fundraising.
Right.
fundraising during the fundraising periods. But John, we'd like to hear a little bit about your role as music director of WBGO and give people a sense of what that role involves.
John's role or my role?
No, your role as music director at WBGO. Yeah, John, I don't think John is a music director. I don't see,
hey,
he's got his own music he directs.
But let me tell you something about WBGO. You know, I have that moniker, right? And I am the so-called gatekeeper to an extent. But in the traditional sense of the music director, we rely upon one another. And someone will give me a suggestion, I'll share a suggestion with someone else. So it's a real collective that gets the business done at WBGO. Someone making me aware of a recording that I'm unaware of. I mean, we all work together to make WBGO the best it can be, whether it's on air or some of our other platforms, some of our web presence on WBGO would not necessarily be music that you would hear on the air, but it's all part of our mission to be as much as we can be. You know, you can't be all things to all people. You end up being nothing to nobody, but try to be as comprehensive of an arts organization as it applies to the jazz arts as we possibly can be. And the advent of the internet has allowed us to do just that. I mean, if you go to the internet today, you'll see Dr. Lonnie Smith with Iggy Pop singing a Donovan tune. Well, you're not going to hear that on the air, but I think you'd be surprised if you took a few minutes and listened to it. It's not bad.
Now, have you been the music director since you started, or is that a role that you took on? When did you take that role on, and what did that?
Oh, probably. I'm guessing Carmen. It's Carmen, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
There's a lot of faces out here.
I'm guessing a little over 20 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. But it is, you know, I can't stress strongly enough that we have Michael Bourne, a senior editor for Downbeat magazine for 40 years. Bob Porter has Grammy Awards as bookends on the mantle in his home. You know, Rhonda Hamilton, who's one of the premier broadcasters in this country. Well, what fool wouldn't pay attention to these people and what they had to say? So it's a real collective situation that gets it done. Now, it's not high school radio. You don't come in and play whatever the hell you want to play. You know, there is what's called a format. Oh, that's that horrible word, format. But it gives a sense of consistency within the unexpected. If you know what the unexpected coming jazz improvisation, and the consistency being from, you're not going to hear somebody doing a 20 show and then somebody doing a fusion show. You know, that's called block programming, and that kind of went out with college radio in the 1970s. Some commercial stations have a little bit of it. BGO has a little bit of it too when you talk about Felix Hernandez. But if you take the music that Felix Hernandez plays, you can tie that thread, man. You can tie that thread right into the world of jazz, and deeper than that, even into the world of blues. Yeah. So it's all connected.
So I want to get to Zach's question. Zach is working with our Jazz Arts Academy, which is our program that actually works with young musicians, young students, teaching them how to become musicians, play jazz. And he wants to know, did you ever learn a musical instrument? And then also, as the second part is also, what do you like best about the genre of jazz? And so Zach is there if you want to turn your mic off, and you can engage as well.
Hey, guys.
Sure. Hi, Zach. How you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm great. I want to say that I reached the intermediate level on the flutophone. which you may know as a recorder. For a while, I played the drums. I even had a drum set for a while. When I was a kid, my father would come home from the office, and I had a desk in my bedroom, and one of those huge pads that you could doodle on and draw notes, before they had Post-its. They just had these huge pads, and then you'd rip the sheet off and start a new day. Well, he put one on my desk, and what did I do? I drew 88 piano keys and pretended I was Jerry Lee Lewis. But athletics got in the way, believe it or not, and I never became a practicing musician. Now, the genre of jazz, what do I like about it the most? I think it's the element of surprise. And as we like to say, and other people have said, there's only one constant in jazz, and it's change. And so the best thing for me about that constant of change is a young musician who's not afraid to look over his or her shoulder and take what came maybe 40, maybe 50 years ago, and use that as the foundation for their expression going forward. Because my opinion is, if you don't, and there are many who believe you don't have to look over your shoulder, that's a huge mistake. Because if you don't, you're simply, as Carmen would do, you're running in place. Mm-hmm. Where's your traction otherwise? And I remember one night I was at the Westchester Jazz Orchestra hosting one of their concerts when they were still in business. And Joe Lovano was the guest artist. Now, here's a guy, you don't get any more progressive than Joe Lovano. And so they took some questions from the audience, and a woman stood up and she said, I have a young son who wants to be a jazz saxophone player. Do you have any advice for him? And without blinking, Joe said, tell him to know all the decades, and that will give him the juice and the foundation, the footers, whatever you want to call them, to springboard forward. I think people are making a huge mistake when they try to create music without any substance of foundation or what came before.
Hear, hear. Carmen,
yes.
Speaking of connections and mission and all that, I wonder if you wouldn't say a few words about what our organization is about,
so
and where we're going.
Jazz Arts Project has been around for 16 years in the New Jersey area in Red Bank. And what we do, of course, is we bring jazz to the community. We keep jazz fresh and hot and happening through world-class performances, which we have not been able to do for a year, unfortunately. But we are planning to get some stuff going in April, which will be Jazz Appreciation Month. So we're going to have some live stream performances coming for you next month. And we also do Jazz Arts Academy, which Zach right now is out there doing recruitment, looking to get some students involved with us. We have students, of course, currently, but we're looking to get some new students involved. And in order to do that, in order to keep jazz going and to keep our organization alive, we ask for your support and contributions. So I'm going to give you our website, which you can go on to www.jazzartsproject.org/give. And as I always say, I said this at WBGO, and I say this no matter when I ask, no dollar is too small. Every dollar matters. So you can give $5, $10, $100, $1,000, and however you like to contribute, we would appreciate that. So thank you so much for that. And of course, it helps us continue to bring this series to you. Last year, we did 32 episodes. And this year, we're going to continue bringing great musicians, artists, DJs, intellectuals from the jazz community to you as well. So I want to do that with a lead in. There's two things I want to ask. First of all, Bill and Jan Shearer, it looks like you guys, you said, Bill, you said your wife did a hosting hour. Are you here, Bill? Bill, do you want to say something about the hosting hour? I think Bill is turning on his microphone. So Bill says he did, his wife did host an hour, and it was a great experience. He's always loved jazz. Hi there,
Hey, here
Bill.
she is. Here she is.
There she is.
I was, this was on March 17th, which happened to be my birthday. And Michael Bourne was the DJ, and he was wonderful to me. I found it one of the most interesting, exciting times of my life because I grew up with music because my dad always had music on. And this gave me a chance to choose some of the songs that I loved hearing when Dad was around and some of the newer stuff. And I had always wanted to do a little DJ, and this was my opportunity. Now I'm almost 85, and I doubt if I will have that opportunity again, but it was truly a wonderful time. Thank you, BGO, for giving us that opportunity to do that.
Well, thank you, Jan, and to Bill for your support of WBGO that allows us to continue to do this each and every day and host an hours. I've had people celebrating birthdays like Jan in March. I've had people celebrating wedding anniversaries. I had a guy one morning propose to a girlfriend at the end of the hosting hour. And I don't know, I'm thinking maybe 11 years. John, you probably know closer than I do. I think about 11 years. I think they're still married for like 10, 11 years, if I'm not mistaken. And sometimes...
And host an hour is a fun thing. I actually, people don't know this, but I am planning to do another host an hour. I got to work on it myself. It's going to take me a minute, but that's one of my future goals as well. It's a lot of fun. It's amazing.
It is.
Well, I just want to jump in there because I want to acknowledge that Jan and Bill Shearer have been friends of our organization and supporters for many, many, many years, probably from the beginning, as far as I know. So I want to thank them as well, and many.
For all you do, and we miss your picnics too.
That's right. Yeah, they were always at our Labor Day weekend barbecues. So we miss you for sure, and thanks for all that, and many years of more listening to you.
So I know we are running a little bit short on time, but I want to bring something up, Gary, which was a special moment for me at WBGO, which I think might be fun for the audience to hear. WBGO brings a lot of new talent, new talent to audiences. And one of the talents that I got to discover when I was there was Cecile McLaurin-Savant. I remember meeting her when she first came to the studio with her, I think it was her second album. I think it was her first commercial big album. She had an independent one prior to that. But she did an interview with Michael Bourne, and of course she went on to do amazing things. Well, one of the people that I remember getting the opportunity to meet is a young man by the name of Joey Alexander. And I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about that experience, because I remember when he came into the studio and he played our piano, and a relationship, kind of a professional relationship grew between you two that got you onto 60 Minutes. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Joey Alexander and what that has been like watching him grow as an artist. He's now 17, I believe.
Joey Alexander is just one of those many people. And you find it with the Jazz Arts Project, I'm sure, each and every day, whether are you going to make the next Joey Alexander or Keith Jarrett or Bud Powell? It doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because what you're instilling in young people when they study the world of jazz is the common denominators of communication, of competition, of camaraderie, of having a dialogue with one another and working together to come up with a finished product that you're all proud of. Those are elements and things that you can apply to anything that you do in life. And the fact that, it comes via the jazz arts is just, I think it's a luxury to learn about this music. And it gives you the freedom to, was it Spalding Gray? Think out of the box, right? But as it relates to Joey Alexander, that's a very special young man. And I know, Winton's comments from the 60 Minutes segment that you referred to, Carmen, said it all. When someone said, how does he do what he does? And it's like, you don't have to explain it. You can't. It just is. It's like Miles Davis. How do you explain Miles Davis? You don't. He just was. John Coltrane. How do you explain John Coltrane and where he went and how he did what he did and how he expressed himself? You don't. He just did. And I think along with that came an openness. And to see that openness and experience that openness in a live setting when someone is 10, 11 years old, you've really stumbled upon something special that you probably won't see again. We have young players that are coming up that are pretty damn good too. I can remember Isaiah J. Thompson, watching him when he was part of the Jazz House Kids project, when he was a young teenager. And he has blossomed to the extent that, his last album gave him the confidence to explore the world of Buddy Montgomery. And for somebody like Joey Alexander to explore the world of Bill Evans, to explore the world of John Coltrane, and explore his own world. My God, to come up with his own compositions, complete from start to finish, and really say something and yet have closure. We got a lot of wanderers in this music, and the advent of the CD kind of did that. John's smiling. He knows what I'm saying here is that, that people used to be restricted. You got 18 minutes to say what you're going to say. Say it. You got this LP. Oh my God. Why, it's almost 45 minutes. Yeah, but you still got a restriction. The CD kind of let people wander all around the creative process. We got a lot of wanderers, but within that, we've got some folks that are, and you referenced one in Cecile McLaurin Savant, and Jasmia Horn, and Joey Alexander, and Joel Ross on the vibraphone, and some of the other young players, Emmanuel Wilkins. Look for a real nice podcast with him on our website at wbgo.org. I mean, these are some of the young players that are making things happen.
Wow, that's fantastic. I see we're even running over our time a little bit. Are there any other questions? We can gonna have to wrap this up very soon. If there are, just come on, unmute yourself and have a little discussion here. That's okay. Otherwise, well, Gary, this was fantastic discussion. I hope everybody, takes away from it what I have. It's been a great learning experience and a great thing to listen to for me, from my perspective.
All this month on WBGO, in celebration of Women's History, Joe, you will hear special session performances that were captured at our performance studio. Allison Miller and Jenny Scheinman, the all-female group Linus, Bria Schoenberg, Betty Lavette. Oh boy, you didn't ask me about Betty Lavette.
Oh, I did not ask you about Betty Lavette.
That's one of my moments, man. It was when I got to meet Betty Lavette, because there's a rich history walking down the street, and you can, every time she sings a tune and makes it her own. But we're going to be featuring sessions throughout the month. Are they going to be
on the show, or she's going to be featured this month?
They'll be featured. You just have to listen 24 hours a day. I mean, it's not a huge requirement.
Well, we can go on. We can still go online and get the rewind, right? Can we go and
all of those artists that I referenced And even I referenced the Chicoria Bela Fleck. That's also online. Just a fantastic afternoon in New York City with two cats that came from such different worlds and made such amazing music when they came together.
Sure.
It's all part of who we are, and just as exciting as looking forward to what we have in store for tomorrow.
I like to think that we are have our sympathetic organizations, that we're looking towards the same goals and the same beauty in an exploration of being human, and we hope that more and more listeners become more and more engaged in the music as well. So we have those common goals, and for our organization, I remember that the year before we shut down, we spent our whole season honoring women in jazz, our whole summer season, and our whole Talkin' Jazz series was about women in jazz. So that was really enlightening, to tell you the truth, and people in our audience seemed to enjoy it as well. And it wasn't in March. I missed the boat on the March thing, but we do it all year long, right? In our usual, we're usually accustomed to having what we call an after gig hang. So anyone of you who are want to hang out a little bit and have a little after gig discussion for a little short time, please feel free to stay on. But we're gonna end the actual recording, and there's a Facebook feed going on as well.
So we want to say thank you, Gary, for joining us on.
And I want to thank
Monday
Gary for sure. Please, if you're up that early, turn on WBGO for Pete's sake, and listen to Morning Jazz with Gary Walker.
I could use another listener, and it seems like if you all, I've met both of my listeners so far. No. So if a more you come on board, that'll just make it all the more. John's heard that line so many times.
Well,
and Sheila Anderson, who's still with us there, she left and then she came back, I think.
Hello, Sheila.
Turn that mic on, Sheila.
Sheila was our guest also one time on Talkin' Jazz, I believe.
Yeah. No, she's fantastic, man. The author.
Oh, yeah.
You're up in Harlem, right, Sheila?
I'm in Harlem. Yeah. No, I've been here the whole time. I just didn't think I was. I wasn't presentable.
You're always welcome, of course.
and Wednesday nights. Don't forget Wednesday night, the Women of Jazz '88.
Yes. Right. Now, is this live? Is this live on Wednesday night?
Clearance to come together.
Yep.
All right, folks. I'm gonna end the official proceedings. Those of you who want to hang and talk a little bit, please feel free to do so. Gary, thanks so much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, those of you who have sent donations along. I really appreciate it. And we're going to continue. In 2 weeks, we'll have another episode of Mondays with Mooche. And we're getting ready for April, some live stream concert experiences to send your way. So you'll be hearing about that. If you haven't yet, sign up on for our mailing list at jazzartsproject.org. So thanks so much, and here's what I can say.
Did you draw that yourself?
I did.
Really?